Welcome, and today you join me down at Willow Lake in Lincolnshire, somewhere I've personally fished for the last 12 or 13 years. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you on a guided tour of the whole complex from lake to lake, tell you exactly what's in each lake, some hints and tips that might help put those extra few fish in your net for you when you visit here, and also anything you need to know in terms of rules. Now, I've been here a little while, I've gone and dropped my stuff off in a swim on Oak Lake. It'd be rude not to try and winkle a fish out while we're here for 24 hours. So just to take you through some general housekeeping and what you can expect when you first turn up to the complex. So behind me, this is a cabin, and this is where you'll need to come first with your vehicles. So when you turn up to the car park, you'll need your landing net and your retention sling, which Chris and the guys will need to dip before you start your session. Please, please, please make sure they're absolutely bone dry. And then if you go inside, this is where you'll purchase any bait you need. So he sells Trent baits on site, house pellet, and particle as well. You can also bring your own bait, but if you look at oldmillakes.com, have a look through the rules on exactly what you can and can't bring before you come. Now, when you see this video, the chances are things have changed slightly, so everything will be moving over to swim booker. So for Alder, Oak, and Willow Lake, everything will be on there and available to book through. Birch, however, will still be a members and invitation only sort of syndicate type water. So without further ado, I'll talk you through the lake. So Birch, which is the lake which has got the biggest set of fishing at the minute, is a members only water. It's an invitation only, but it is still a day ticket. After that, you've got Willow Lake, which is the lake which has been around for the longest, probably my favourite lake on the complex. Then you've got Oak Lake, which is sort of the relatively new lake. It's been around for probably 6 or 7 years now. That's maturing nicely. And then behind me, you also have Alder Lake, which is more of a holiday type venue that you can book out with a lodge, with a lake exclusive and a hot tub. So without further ado, we're now going to head over to Willow and I'll talk you through everything you need to know. Okay, so up first we have Willow Lake. Now it's probably my favourite lake on the complex. It's the one that's been here for the longest, and it was the initial lake that was here when Chris bought the land. It's a relatively small lake. It's more long and thin. You've got 6 pegs along one bank with no pegs on the far bank. It's brilliant if you want to book it for group socials, or there's 2 or 3 of you wanting to come down for a little bit of a social. It's also got a stock of around 180 carp, 10 of which are over £40. One that is probably now, if it's not over 50, it will be very, 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 very soon. It can be tricky. It's probably, in my opinion, the most difficult lake on the complex because it has been around for so long. The fish have seen everything, but on its day, they are more than catchable. So let's go and take a look. Okay, so you join me in peg 1 on Willow Lake. It's a nice sizable swim, and behind me is a lot of shallow ground. So you've got between 5 and 7 feet of water. It can get weedy in the summer months. Consequently, the fish do spend a lot of time down here sunbathing in the weed as well. If you get those nice clear days, mild conditions during the winter as well, the fish will migrate up this end and the top end as well. In terms of peg 2, very much the same. It comes down more gradually on a slope, so you've got a little bit of deeper water in the middle of peg 2. But as you come up to the side of it and come into this peg, there's a lot of shallow ground, loads of features to go at. Obviously, all the pegs are on this side. So you've got reeds, you've got far margins, loads of places to not intercept the carp. So it's a lovely swim, especially during the spring and those warmer months. Okay, what I will say at this point is it is very tempting to fish that back wall, and you will still catch fish over there. But again, in my experience, at this point now, it has been done to death. The fish see rigs over there all the time from anglers. And like I said, it is a great interception spot and you can get bites there. But for me in this lake, placing your rigs where the fish wouldn't normally see they'll get caught is the edge. So for me, a lot of the times now, I'm fishing at the bottom of the near side shelf, even during the depths of winter. And behind me in this corner, quiet little corner, finding a nice clear spot to present a rig to with a couple of handfuls of bait, then big uns will drift in there, out the way of the pressure. That back wall, a lot of the smaller samper fish get caught over there. They tend to congregate and shoal up over there. The big uns will get caught over there, obviously, at certain times. But for me, if you can position your rig where maybe other people don't or don't think to, that can be a real edge on this lake. Right, so we move on to peg 4. So 3 and 4 in the lake are command the bowls. So it's the central zone of the lake, and it goes down to 14 foot in the middle. So if you imagine Willow is basically like this, you've got the shallows either side, drops down, and then meets in the middle. Consequently, peg 3 and 4 are brilliant winter sort of holding areas for the carp. Like I mentioned from peg 1 there, if you do go to those bright, clear days, it warms up slightly by a degree or 2. They can push up into the other pegs as well. But for me, peg 3 and 4 are very, very good winter pegs. Now, I do know Chris has got plans to maybe drain this in the coming winters and flatten it off. So what I'm telling you at the minute might not be current if you come down further down the line, but as it stands at the minute, that's what's out there now. What I will say at this time of the year, obviously you don't really want to be in 14 foot, it's a spring. As much as that far shelf does get hammered, I would probably stagger my rods. This isn't the sort of lake where you want to be putting 3 rods on a spot. For me, it is more spotty, so I might have one in the near margin, 1 3/4 over it, and one on the far side, and then wherever I'm getting the bites from, that's where I'll adapt them basically. So if I'm getting all the bites from the near margin, I'll then bring 2 in and leave 1 out there. And the same with coloured hook baits as well. There isn't one particular colour hook baits on this lake that does well. I've done really well on match to hatch. Washed out pink is a killer during the winter time. Do really, really well on that. But yeah, for me, peg 4, brilliant holding up area for winter. The near side margin, guys, please do not underestimate it. Like, you've got the shelf on the far side, you've got the shelf on the near side as well. No end of times I've caught some of the biggest fish in the lake from swimming up and down underneath your rod tips. You never know they're there. Like, even so much as only 2.5 rod lengths out. It drops down, you've got around 8 foot of water, a little bit further out, 10 foot of water, and then it finally goes off into 14 foot. So there's a lot of deep water there where you would never know they're there. So please, please, please don't ignore it. And also feed to your bites. You don't have to come and stove the bait in, because if they're not having it, like I said, this lake can be difficult and tricky depending on the pressure, the weather conditions, the time of the year. So feed to your bites. If you are getting bites, then by all means put the bait in, keep the bites coming, but feed little and often. Keep something moving in the swim, keep it fresh, keep moving your rods around, and liners as well. For me, liners is a massive thing on this lake. Nice slack lines, whereas, say for instance, Oak, you're fishing out at maybe 70, 80 yards, tight lines. This is completely the opposite for me. So I normally sink my rod tips, use fluorocast, pay off loads of slack line, get it drooping, and then fish for liners, because that sometimes is an indicator of whether you're on them or not. But yeah, for me, staggering your rods, 1 on the far side, 1 3/4, and 1 in the near margin is always a good bet when I fish this swim. So you join me now at the top end of the lake, so we're in peg 5 and 6. And there's not really a great deal to say that hasn't been said really. It's exactly the same sort of topography as peg 1 and 2. So you come out of the bowl, you come up the sides, peg 5 here, you're coming up the shelf. Fairly relatively deep water still out in front of you in the middle. And then as it comes up to peg 6, you've got around 5, 6 foot of water. Again, gets relatively weedy, certainly during the summer months. That far margin, you'll have a nice reed line. When it does get warm, all of that back side, there'll be lovely reeds. But what I will say is maybe go around there with a set of Polaroids and a little bit of bait before you start your session. Certainly during the warmer months, you never know what you might see. The lakes have been blue dyed, but with it being really shallow over there, you've got 2, 3 foot of water tight against those reeds. Usually you can see something, even if it's just tail patterns and swirls. So for me, if I was coming here now, this time of the year, we're well into the spring, I would be quite happy in all the pegs. There'll be spots in all the pegs where you can get bites spun, but personally I'd be heading for peg 6, peg 1, 2, 5, that sort of shallow ground. And if you did end up in peg 3 or 4, then I would look sort of 3/4 of the way across to that far shelf on the other side, just looking for that shallow ground. So again, from my experience of fishing here for over the last 10, 12, 13 years, a lot of the lakes do daytime bites. Near enough all the lakes are predominantly daytime bites. Yes, certain times of the year, certainly in the warmer months, nighttime action, you can get nighttime bites. But through the winter, and even during this time of the year, make sure you have your rods in during the day, because you'll spend a lot of hours of darkness, probably not catching a lot. You'll hear them out there for whatever reason, but during the hours of light, you really need your rods in position, ready to go, because that is your sort of sweet spot to be getting bites. Now, that's all I've really got to say on Willow. Like I said, you've got nearly a dozen 40-pounders in here to almost 50-pounders, a lot of big fish. The effort is definitely, the rewards are in here for the effort for sure. But for now, we're going to move on from here and we'll head over to Birch. So behind me we have Birch Lake. Now, to give you a little bit of history, this lake has undergone probably 3 different types of transformations now. So initially, Birch was one particular lake, which is now known as the old side, which is the side you can actually see behind me. So the lake was initially dug. Once the fish got to a certain sort of size, Chris wanted to expand the lake, so he did. So he consequently built a new lake behind it, or what was called the new lake. So imagine the lake was separated into two different sides, a spit straight down the middle that you could fish off, and then you fished into either the old side or the new side with pegs around it as well. That happened for a few years. The fish could get between both lakes, in the new side and the old side. The new side predominantly was shallower, got a lot more weed in it. The old side was a little bit deeper, did really well in the winter, fishing in between the islands and the deeper water. However, nowadays, Chris wanted to take it one step further. So what he's done is actually taken out the arm that he fished off in the middle, gave the fish a lot more water. Consequently, the wind can get through a lot more, and those fish have now exploded into ridiculous sizes. So you've got about 180 carp in Birch, 4 of them over 60 pounds, numerous 50 pounders, and I couldn't even tell you the amount of 30s and 40s in there. The stock is actually ridiculous. It's got to be one of the best stock of fish in terms of per acre anywhere in the country, really, certainly up this end of the country anyway. Some of the fish in there I've fished for a lot over the years. I don't tend to do a lot of time on there myself, maybe 1 or 2 trips a year as maybe a bit of a treat. Last year did a couple of sessions, managed a 40 pounder each trip, so if you do get on there, you don't necessarily need to do a lot of time. Birch is more predominantly lends itself to more boilie fishing, so catapults, throwing stick, match to hatch baits. That's what Birch normally fishes well with. Pink baits, white baits during the sort of colder months, early spring, do really, really well, but staying mobile are found on Birch. Little bits of bait, again, feeding little and often, feeding to your bites, slack lines, fluorocarbon or fluorocast line if you can, fishing for your liners, and again, don't be afraid to move. The fish will naturally migrate into areas where there's no lines, and like I said, the fish are big in there, they do eat, and when they do get on the munch, you can get through the bait. So whole boilies, half boilies, pellets do really well as well at certain times of the year, spotting, but for me, a lot of the time, I'm finding fish, slack lines, fishing for liners, little sort of patches of bait here and there, getting and picking boilies up, and that's how I've had some really good success. Some of the bigger fish I've actually caught, riggers, which is now 62, 63 pound. I had at 40, just under 49 pound a good few years ago. There's a lot in there that I still haven't caught, but like I said, for me personally, I use it as more of a treat. But if you wanted to get on this lake, you know, it's an invitation and it's a membership only. So what you would have to do is you would have to come fish maybe Willow Lake, Oak Lake, show your face, show Chris that you're fine handling his fish, you catch a few, you look after them, you know, you're a good person with good etiquette, and over time you may be offered a winter ticket, you have your winter ticket, and that's how you end up getting a full ticket. So if you did want to get on here, it is possible. There's just ways and means you have to go about it. So coming here and enjoying the other lakes first, getting your winter self and winter ticket on here, and then progressing into a full ticket, that's how I would do it. But Birch, like I said, the fish stock is absolutely incredible, and if you're after a big fish, then for me, this is the place to do it. Okay, so we are going to keep things brief on here. Like I mentioned, Birch is a membership invitation only water, so most of you will be coming and fishing Oak or Willow. Well, behind me is a particular area I've fished a lot of over the past. It's an old side and it's called Steps 2. You've got a nice cut through to the island, another nice little island down to your left hand side, and it gives you plenty of access to open water as well. Actually did 2 sessions on here last year. This was, well, 1 session in this swim, managed 7 fish to just over 40 pounds. So this was a swim I used to spend a lot of time in back in the day. It is a popular swim, and even more so when the fish are here. So we're going to head off to another one now, just before we go and get the rods out on Oak. Okay, so you now join me over my shoulder in what effectively was known as the new side until everything got split up. A lot of open water out there, and just to my right hand side, which will be your left, we have what's known as Party Point, which is basically 3 or 4 swims together where the lads can all have a social, and it's a swim that I actually fished last year. Well, one of out of the 2 sessions, one was Steps 2, and then on Party Point, and I managed a nice 46 mirror. So as the name suggests, Party Point, this particular side of the lake does get really busy. It's a nice popular swim because you've got so much water to go at as well. You've got in between the islands, you've got tight up against the islands, you've got the channels, and there's so much open water there. When I fished on it last year and caught that lovely 46 pound mirror, the fish were there, they were showing. I only had a quick night at my disposal, and I managed to catch one, once again proving that you don't need loads of time on your hands here. You can turn up, find the fish, and they are catchable, certainly during those warmer months. Okay, so I think we'll leave things there on Birch. We're going to head over to Oak Lake now because I'm really itching to get those rods out. Okay, so that nicely brings us on to the last lake, and that is Oak Lake. So as you can see, I'm finally set up. I've got a couple of rods out there at the minute, but in terms of the lake itself, it's roughly around 8 acres in size, and this lake was developed to primarily be for anybody to come and catch fish. So It was just a rectangle full of fish, 6 foot deep all over, no weed, no snags, featureless, where your everyday angler or pleasure angler could turn up, cast out and be getting bites. So much so that when it was first dug, the first trip I did, I had 41 fish, and I think the biggest was 22 pounds, something like that. Like, it's come on leaps and bounds since then, but that's primarily what it was designed for. So I think it had over 1,000 fish in it, and it was a highly stocked water basically. And what you've got is you've got 7 pegs along each bank. So down either side you've got no pegs there. It's about 23 wraps to the middle. So what I usually say is don't go any more than 22 on either side and give yourself a good couple of rod lengths in between. But yeah, since then it's kind of come on leaps and bounds. Like, I don't even think Chris and everybody could even imagine how big and how fast these fish have grown. Like, it's gone from, you know, having a scrape of 30, a few 20s, mostly doubles and single figure fish, to I think now there's a stock of around 400 carp, well over 100 of them are 30 pounders. You've got a dozen 40 pounders. You've got one confirmed 50 and 150 that is probably going to be touching it when it comes out next time. So the stock of fish for this lake is just incredible. Don't get me wrong, gone are the days of the 40, 50 fish hits. Like, it will do big hits around the lake at certain times of the year. It's still got a lot of fish in it. But now you're looking for half a dozen to a dozen on a good session, and the chances are within that, the ratio of fish you are going to catch a 30 pounder if you land 3 or 4 fish, because the average size is just that big now. So if you're the angler out there who is wanting to come with no stress, enjoy yourself, maybe break your personal best that you've held for a very long time and struggled to do, or you know, you want to build your experience up with bigger fish, then this is definitely the venue for you. It's also very nice for socials, especially with 7 pegs on each bank. You want to come with a couple of mates, you get my side by side, and you can really have some good sport on here. This session, the lake is fishing slow. We've just come into spring. We're at least 2 to 3 weeks behind in terms of the weather. We've got a night though, so I'm hopeful, but as of yesterday morning, I'm led to believe there hasn't even been a single bite. So it is fishing slow. However, the rods are out there. There's a lot of big fish, so at some point they've got to feed. But yeah, like I said, Oak Lake is one of those waters where you can expect lots of action, and if you really do want to break your personal best, then this is the lake to come and have a go on. So during the early part of the year, spring coming into the summer, I find the fish do generally get on the end of the wind. It can be, you know, it doesn't even have to be a big wind, just a light breeze blowing into one of the corners and the fish will get onto it. And at the minute, it's really, well, to be honest with you, it's really busy. There's 13 anglers on out of 14 pegs, and I've kind of had to slot in where I could. But I am sort of on the wind. I would have liked to have been in one of the M pegs at this time of the year. What you find is, because there's no pegs down those sides, they do become like magnets to the fish. And 2 things in this lake that are the biggest features are the M pegs and your bait, because there is 0 out there. There's nothing out there. It's 6 to 6.5 feet all the way along, and either your bait's a feature in the middle swims, or if the wind's hacking into the M pegs, that's where you want to be. Now, once they spawn and you sort of get into the autumn, they can get on the back of it as well. Well, certainly through my experience at this time of the year, trying to get on that wind is crucial because they do follow it. But like I've already mentioned, the bait does become a feature in these middle swims, and again, through my experience, the M pegs will catch you more fish because the smaller stamp fish seem to target those areas. You know, there's no pressure really apart from a couple of pegs, and it's slightly shallower water. Whereas personally, I do like to try and target the middle zone. I do think the bigger fish hang out there, and if you adapt your tactics with sort of a match to hatch, straight boiler fishing approach in the middle, yes, you're probably not going to get as many bites as the M pegs, but your average size of fish should be a little bit higher. So yeah, for me personally, I prefer to target the central zone of the lake if I can. Don't get me wrong, if there was stacks of fish showing down one of the sides and there was a peg, then I'd have no problem with going in that as well. But for me, that match to hatch style boiler fishing in the middle definitely lends itself to catching those bigger fish. So like I've already mentioned, I've got a couple of rods out there. I've got the next 24 hours to hopefully make something happen. I've got one more rod to get in the lake. So once I've done that, I've got a few more tips to show you to hopefully put more fish on the bank for you. Okay, so it's time to get the third rod out there on the spot. And as I've already mentioned, I'm going to go for a sort of max to hatch, total boilie approach, try and pick out those bigger fish. So this is sort of my go-to setup really on here now. It's just a very simple combi rig. I'll talk you through the business end first. So on there, I've got a freshwater shrimp dumbbell wafter, and that's on a size 4 apex curve hook. A little bit of shrink tube there, and then the braided section is actually tied up with our shockweave braided sort of shock leader material. It's just that little bit stiffer that with a wafter hook bait you ensure it always kicks away and it can't fall back on itself. I've then got around 6 inches of our 20 pound spectra fluorocarbon with a small sort of mouse dropping of the rock bottom tungsten put in there. I've got a rock bottom tungsten tangle sleeve on that end, that's to a quick change swivel, one of our uni leg clips, and then to finish it off for the venue rules, I've got a short section of rock bottom tungsten tubing on there in the brown just to camouflage everything off, and then down to our 18 pound fluorocast mainline. So let's get this out there. Okay, so it's time to get the third rod in position. Give the old updater TLC, and then like I mentioned, we're going to use match the hatch. So I've just got some freshwater shrimp boilies here, a match the hatch dumbbell hook bait. I'm going to put some few whole baits, a couple of half baits in there as well, just to open that seal on the bait. And like I said, at this point, you know, you could add some pellets if you wanted to, but for me, I'd sooner sit there a little bit longer and hope that sort of one of those bigger fish comes along. So all that boilie approach, let's see what happens. Okay, so as you can see, I'm using the Hunter on this session, and on Willow and Oak you're allowed boats, on Birch you're not. And I'll be completely honest with you, love them or hate them, you know, unfortunately, if you don't use a boat on a boat dominated water, you're literally putting yourself at a massive disadvantage to start. There's absolutely fine to be spodding, casting, no problem. You'll still get loads of bites by doing that. However, the Hunter with the perfect amount of bait, it's quiet, it's stealthy, it's quick, getting 3 rigs in position, you just won't be able to beat it, like especially in a crosswind like this. Me trying to spom out there at 22 wraps in this crosswind, getting a few spoms of boilies over the top of it would be next to impossible with just 3 spoms. So like I said, if you don't use them on boat dominated waters, you can get left behind because they are a real edge whether you do like them or you don't. But for me, the Hunter is the perfect boat for this sort of situation. And like I said, I've got no problem with casting and spomming, and if the fish were having it, you know, it would be quicker to fish like that. If we were getting loads and loads of multiple bites now, it'd be quicker to cast the rig, spom the bait out, and there'd be absolutely no problem. But with how it's fishing, it's not done a bite since Monday, which is a couple of days ago. The last thing you want me doing is making any more disturbance than what you actually need to make. So by doing this, it just allows me to get them out there quicker and hopefully not put the carp on edge too much. So that's the reason I'm using the boat. Like I said, I'll probably go as far as to say 70% of the people on this lake use boats. That's it. She'll drive herself back now. Hopefully that's 3 rods on the dance floor, and despite it not doing many bites, hopefully it'll nickels one. Okay, so another little tip is, in complete contrast to what I said about Willow and Birch in terms of the slack line, I'm using tight lines on here. And the reason that I do that is, obviously at the minute we've got a savage crosswind, and with nothing, no features underneath the water, no islands, nothing to break that wind up, I'm sure the undertow can get quite savage on here as well. If you just pay slack out, all it's going to do is drift and drift and drift. You're not going to get the same effect as you would do fishing close in on Willow. And obviously out here we're fishing at 80 yard. you've got a decent amount of line out there. But with the fluorocast, it's virtually invisible underwater. Obviously, it's going to stand out a little bit compared to if you were using a slacker line. But at that sort of range, the tubing is going to be on the bottom. But with the swims being so tight and so close on here as well, what you often find is hooking them at that range, because they've got no depth, they kind of kite. And I've done it no end of times where I've ended up, you know, landing it halfway between me and the next guy, or even in the next guy's swim, nick one per one. And it's just what happens on here at that sort of range. And if you've got slack lines, that can be a bit of a nightmare to deal with. The tighter your lines are, the easier it is to sort of nick one per one, pass them round, and to get yourself out of that situation. So the other thing is as well, I want to know the minute something happens out there. So the minute I get a bleep, I want to know that it's an indication that there's a chance that there's a fish on. So straight away, tight lines for me on here are a must really for that reason. So just to give you a morning update, unfortunately, it's been very quiet on the fishing front. Haven't seen a lot caught. In fact, I've only seen one small stocky caught since I've been here, which for this lake isn't particularly great. Normally you'd be seeing people catch fish, and to be honest with you, I'm not really seeing a great deal either in terms of shows. One of the end swims has become available now for the last couple of hours. I'm going to move down there, get a couple of rods out. It's a little bit shallower water, and the majority of fish I have seen have been down the sides, hardly anything out in open water. So yeah, we'll get these rods moved and we'll see what happens. Nobody can say it was lack of effort. Okay, so after saying I want to go with a boilie only approach to try and catch the bigger fish, obviously now we're coming towards the end of the session. So it's just about nicking a bite. So I have got some of the sort of fast breakdown pellets that Trent do. This is a shrimp and the squid, but it's actually the boilie base mix. They break down within a couple of minutes on the bottom. So I'm just going to put enough in to try and tempt a bite. Still a match the hatch up bait, but yeah, it's just about nicking a bite now. So hopefully get this down that side and it'll do the job for us. Well, that draws us to the end of this session. Completely out of character for this lake, really. I've seen it fish through difficult periods before, and usually, you know, there's still fish, the odd fish getting caught around the lake, but that hasn't happened this time. We moved into this swim. There's the odd fish showing down there every now and again, but I just don't think they're in numbers, and I think they are sort of the smaller stockies that are sat down there. So, yeah, a little bit disappointing, but that's fishing you can't catch all the time. Like I said, on a normal session, you can expect to come here and catch 5, 10, maybe even 15 carp if you're on them and they're having it and you fish well. So yeah, it's completely out of character. I think personally the weather being up and down, and you know there is a tadpole latch in the side, there's fly hatches, I think that's all contributed, and for the lake to be full with 14 anglers and only do a couple of bites is, yeah, definitely not what you could normally expect from this lake. But hopefully you've enjoyed the little insights about the fishery and the tips that I've shown you to use on Oak Lake, and they'll make your session a lot more successful than mine.